Big question of the week, what is fueling terror? With everyone on alert here, the French ambassador to the United States saying this about the attacks over there.
It's not because you are unemployed that you are blowing yourself, in a theater. It's something which is much more particular, and the problem is radical Islam.
So is it radical Islam or unemployment and poverty that's breeding terrorism? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asen. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Happy holiday weekend. Let's go in focus to find out with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Mike Ozanian, Sabrina Schaefer, John Tamny, and Bruce Japsen. So, Steve, which is it? Is it the poverty excuse or is it something else?
No, it is radical Islam. In this case, religious extremism combined with Marxism. Lenin preached violence and terror, so did Adolf Hitler. These extremists are doing the same thing today. They recruit among people who have hard times. Hitler did in the depths of the Depression. Lenin did after the First World War. But the leaders are often from very good backgrounds. They're very well educated. They're ideological. That's the impetus.
So, Bruce, why do some people continue to say it's poverty that breeds terrorism?
Well, I think that hopelessness leads to, or joblessness leads to hopelessness and despair. And I think that these type of people, whether they be terrorists, whether they be a Charles Manson or a Jim Jones, they prey on vulnerable people. And oftentimes these people don't have jobs and they don't have other things to do, and so they're preyed upon.
But, Mike, at least one of the Paris attackers was affluent. There's a whole slew of terrorists in the past who have come from very affluent backgrounds. These guys aren't deprived of anything. They're depraved, but they're not deprived.
No, David. In fact, a study done by a former CIA operative looked at 172 al-Qaeda terrorists, and 2/3 of them came from middle-income or upper-income families. This is a war against people of Judeo-Christian beliefs. There's a genocide going on, and this whole fallacy that income somehow is a cause of it, that's just something that Obama has thrown out there to get everybody's eye off the ball in terms of what's really going on.
And, John, it is important. You talk to military strategists, they say it's important. In World War II, it was important to know that the Japanese in particular had this fanatical religious belief about the emperor that guided their military policy to some extent.
Yeah, you certainly can't say it's economic, as the rest of the people have said. When you look at the 9/11 attackers, you look at Osama bin Laden, very rich backgrounds. But I'm skeptical about the religious element also. Let's face it, India is full of Muslims, so is Indonesia, but yet they're not all murderers. Thankfully, it's a very microscopic percentage of the religion that wants to hideously attack people. So I think we have to look elsewhere and stop letting them off so easily as though they're driven by religion.
But Sabrina, the fact is that military strategists do say it's important to get it straight because it can affect your military strategy, whether you're going after somebody who's got a gun or somebody who's got a suicide belt. Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, who was the former head of the DIA under President Obama, had this to say about the president's miscalculations here.
Don't talk about radical Islam. Don't talk about this as being a form of a radicalization of the Islamic religion, which in fact it is. It is a cancer inside of the Islamic religion. And the White House and the president, frankly, has not wanted to say that.
I'm just wondering why, Sabrina. Do you have any idea?
Well, I mean, I think this is PC gone awry, but I absolutely agree that this is the root cause is radical Islam, right? I think, as Mike pointed out, that you may be able to recruit people who in some way are preyed upon because they're vulnerable, they don't have jobs, they come from broken homes, but that's not the root cause. We have lots of countries around the globe that are impoverished but that are not the sources of terrorism. A much better data point to point to, a much better correlation, is the freer a country, the much less likely they are to produce terrorist activity. I think that's something that we want to keep our eye on. We want to be working with countries to make sure that they're growing democracies. That will keep us all much safer.
Well, Rich, I'm willing to accept, obviously, that it's a minority of Muslims that are doing these things, but the sympathy, that might be a little larger. We had a correspondent, Benjamin Hall, a Fox News correspondent, who went into areas where immigrant communities were in Europe and found that quite a few of them, the majority, in fact, that he talked to, were supportive of the Parisian attackers. They said the French got what was coming to them.
Well, this is a vicious cycle because if you hate Western values, the business world, the entrepreneurial world, the science world runs on Western values. So if you hate them, you're going to make yourself unemployed and poor. So the two work hand in hand. It just you know, a third of the world is going down a very, very bad path.
Steve, we have these two extremes right now. We have President Obama's one extreme saying it's everything from global warming, we're going to get into that in the next segment, to poverty. And then we have people like Donald Trump suggesting perhaps that the majority of Muslims, or at least a big minority of them, are supportive of this. Which is it?
Well, it's certainly not global warming, and it's certainly not just poverty per se. Poverty may produce recruits to charismatic leaders, but the fact of the matter is that this is ideology. Extreme Islam combined with Marxism, Friedrich Nietzsche nihilism. We saw this in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. We thought it went with the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's come back again in a new guise. But that's the thing. It is an ideology. And people may be sympathetic because they think the West has tramped on them and their culture. But that's why you have to have leaders rise up and say, no, this is very different. The Germans didn't do it, and we saw where that led. The Japanese didn't do it, we saw where that led. Right. Hopefully Muslim leaders will rise up like Isi, the head of Egypt, and say, we got to clean this out.
Well, Bruce, why do you think it is that the French are so intent on calling it radical Islam and we are not?
Well, I mean, they've just been through a traumatic situation. And
we were through a traumatic situation, too. 9/11 was pretty traumatic.
No, I agree. But I think that no matter what happens, I mean, when ISIS is wiped out or whatever, the number one social program, in my opinion, is a job. And you're still going to have to go in there, and you're going to have to, find some way to build economies so people can get to work and they're not being preyed upon.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not simply that some of these individuals themselves are wealthy, but they come from countries that are wealthy, because supporting terrorist activity costs a lot of money. It doesn't come easily to put these people throughout Paris. So it's not simply that individuals are wealthy, but that these countries are wealthy, and that is one of the bigger problems.
I think
we have to stop thinking about this as an economic issue. This is an ideological one.
But let's talk about this, Mike, because we've gone through periods in the United States where we've been through tremendous poverty. The Great Depression, we didn't have a growth of fanatical religions during the Great Depression. Is something else going on here? There's something more fundamental about moral beliefs, I think. I'm not casting aspersions on Islam, but what I'm saying is it's more than just money, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. The reason why President Obama will not use the term radical Islam is because he doesn't want to acknowledge there's a war going on.
That's going to be the last word. Coming up next, forget terrorists. Global warming alarmists say the greatest threat to our security is the climate. The heated debate ahead of Monday's climate summit coming next.